He was the perfect father-in-law, successful, generous, and the pillar of our family. When he gave my wife and me the keys to our dream home, I thought our future was set. I was wrong. It wasn't a gift. It was the first step in a devastating betrayal, a meticulously planned financial crime that put my name on the chopping block. He smiled at family dinners while secretly weaving a web of lies to frame me for his own corruption. How do you fight a man who owns your life and has convinced your wife he can do no wrong? This is the story of how I uncovered the truth and planned a revenge he never saw coming. You have to hear how it ends to believe it. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch. The letter felt like ice in my hand. It wasn't the weight of the paper, it was the weight of the seal in the top left corner, the eagle, the scales, the ominous block letters spelling out Internal Revenue Service. It was addressed to me, Leo Maxwell, at our pristine new home in the quiet suburbs of Austin, Texas. But it was the line in the first paragraph that made my blood run cold. A line referencing an audit of a company called Apex Star Holdings, LLC. I had never heard of Apex Star Holdings, LLC. My heart started doing a frantic, thudding rhythm against my ribs. I read the sentence again and again. It was like my brain refused to process it. An audit for a company I didn't own. A mistake. It had to be a mistake. A typo. A clerical error somewhere in the vast, faceless bureaucracy of the federal government. I took a deep breath, the kind that doesn't actually fill your lungs, and walked into the kitchen where my wife Chloe was humming along to a song on the radio, unpacking groceries. "Hey babe," she said, her smile as bright as the morning sun streaming through our brand new bay window. "Look, they had those organic strawberries you like." That window, the whole house, was a gift from her father, Arthur. Arthur Vance wasn't just my father-in-law. He was a local legend, a self-made real estate magnate who had basically carved this entire suburb, Cypress Creek Estates, out of the Texas hill country with his bare hands and sheer force of will. He was charisma in a $1,000 suit, a man whose laugh could fill a room and make you feel like you were the only person in it. When I'd asked for his blessing to marry Chloe, he hadn't just shaken my hand. He'd clapped me on the shoulder, pulled me into a hug, and said, "Son, you're not just gaining a wife, you're gaining a legacy." At the time, it felt like winning the lottery. I was just a graphic designer with a small freelance business. Marrying Chloe meant marrying into the Vance family, and Arthur made it clear he took care of his own. The down payment on our house wasn't a loan, it was a gift. A foundation, he'd called it, his eyes twinkling. Every young family needs a solid foundation. Now, holding this letter, that foundation felt like quicksand. "Aunt Chloe, what is Apex Star Holdings?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She turned, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Apex what?" "I have no idea." "Why?" I held up the letter. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and took it from me. I watched her face as she read, saw the same journey I'd just taken, from curiosity to confusion to a flicker of fear. But where my fear was sharp and pointed, hers immediately softened into something else. Dismissal. "Oh, this has to be a mistake," she said, handing it back as if it were contaminated. "Dad's accountant handles all this stuff. It's probably just some paperwork mix-up for the house. You know how Dad is with all his companies and projects. That was the default setting in our lives. Dad will handle it. Dad knows best." Arthur hadn't just given us the down payment. A few months after we moved in, he'd sat me down in his study, a room of dark mahogany, smelling of leather and success. He'd poured us 2 fingers of scotch that cost more than my first car. "Leo," he'd begun, his voice a low, confidential rumble. "I'm proud of you. You're a hard worker. But freelancing, it's a tough gig. You need your money to work for you. Let me help." He'd told me about a series of can't-miss private equity investments. Small, exclusive opportunities he got access to. All I had to do was move my savings over to his guy, a financial advisor named Marcus Thorne. "Our Marcus is a genius," Arthur had assured me, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "He's made my family a fortune. He'll set everything up. A few simple accounts, some LCS for tax purposes. It's standard procedure for this level of investment. You won't have to lift a finger." I'd hesitated. I liked managing my own simple portfolio. I understood it. But looking at Arthur, a man who radiated competence and wealth, a man who was offering me a golden ticket, how could I say no? It would have told him I didn't trust him. And more than anything, I wanted his approval. For Chloe's sake and for my own. So I'd agreed. I'd met Marcus Thorne, a slick, fast-talking man who used a lot of jargon I didn't understand, but who spoke about Arthur with a reverence usually reserved for saints. I'd signed a mountain of paperwork, and for the past year I'd received quarterly statements that showed impressive, if slightly confusing, gains. A few times I'd tried to get a clearer picture. I'd called Marcus, asking about a specific transaction or the structure of one of the holding companies. Marcus was always friendly but evasive. "It's complex, Leo," he'd say breezily. "That's what you pay me for. Just relax and enjoy the ride." When I mentioned it to Arthur, he put a hand on my shoulder, a concerned look on his face. "Leo, son, you worry too much. You're a creative, a visionary. Let the numbers guys handle the numbers. You're not a numbers guy. It just stresses you out. You look tired. Is everything okay?" He had this way of turning my legitimate questions into a sign of my own weakness or instability. It was subtle, but effective. Over time, I started to believe him. Maybe I was just getting stressed out. Maybe I wasn't smart enough to understand it. I was a painter, not a banker, so I stopped asking. I learned to just trust. Now, that trust was a knot of acid in my stomach. Her faith in him was absolute, a perfect, unshakable monument. She'd grown up in a world where her father was the sun, and everything revolved around him. She couldn't conceive of a universe where he wasn't benevolent, all-powerful, and right. I listened as she spoke to him on the phone, her voice relaying the details from the letter. I only heard her side of the conversation. "Yes, Apex Star Holdings." "No. He's never heard of it." "Oh, okay. I see, right?" Her face relaxed with every symptom I see. And I see. The tension melted out of her shoulders. She hung up and turned to me, her expression one of gentle chiding. "See? I told you it was nothing," she said, relief washing over her. "Dad said it's one of the passive LTLs Marcus set up for our investment portfolio. He said Marcus probably just put your name down as the primary agent by mistake. He said he'd call him right now and get it all sorted out. He told me to tell you not to worry your pretty little artist head about it." She smiled, expecting me to smile back to feel the same wave of relief. But I didn't. Because Arthur's explanation didn't make sense. You don't just accidentally make someone the primary agent of a company and then have that company get audited by the IRS. And the phrase, "Don't worry your pretty little artist head about it." It was the exact kind of condescending dismissal he'd used on me before. It wasn't meant to reassure, it was meant to shut me down, to make me feel small and incapable. For the first time, a dark thought, ugly and disloyal, slithered into my mind. What if this wasn't a mistake? The next few days were a masterclass in gaslighting. Arthur called me personally. "Leo." "All sorted, my boy," he boomed over the phone. "Just a paperwork snafu. Marcus is a genius, but sometimes his assistants get things crossed. I gave him a good talking to about it. Don't you give it another thought. Now, how about we all go out for dinner this weekend, my treat?" To celebrate. Well, to celebrate nothing at all. Just family. He was so smooth, so confident. He painted a picture of a world where this was a tiny, insignificant bump in the road, already smoothed over by his immense competence. When I tried to push, to ask for a copy of the corrected paperwork, he pivoted. "You're still stewing on that? Leo, you have to learn to let things go. That kind of stress is bad for your health. It's bad for Chloe. She worries about you when you get like this. Obsessive. It's all handled, trust me." He was making me the problem. My anxiety was the issue, not the IRS letter. My lack of trust was the flaw, not the mysterious company. He was framing my search for answers as a form of neurosis. Chloe, hearing his reassurances, sided with him completely. Babe, please," she pleaded with me one night. Dad fixed it. Why can't you just accept that? You're making everyone so uncomfortable." I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I the crazy one? Was I inventing a conspiracy out of a simple clerical error? I almost gave in. I almost let it go. But I couldn't forget the cold dread I felt when I first read that letter. So I did something I had never done before. I started digging. Late at night, after Chloe was asleep, I'd be in my home office, the glow of the monitor lighting my face. I wasn't a detective. I was a graphic designer who knew his way around Google. I started with a simple search, Apex Star Holdings LLC. The public records for the state of Texas were online. It took me less than 10 minutes to find the incorporation documents. My stomach hollowed out when I saw it. The company was registered 8 months ago. And there, listed as the sole registered agent, was my name, my address, and a social security number. My social security number. This wasn't an assistant's mistake. This was deliberate. This was official. My name, my identity, was legally bound to this company. I started looking for Marcus Thorne's credentials. The website for Thorne Financial was polished and professional, filled with photos of smiling families and soaring stock charts. But when I searched for his name on the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority's BrokerCheck website, there was no record, no license, no history. It was a ghost. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. This wasn't right. None of this was right. My hands shaking, I logged into the online portal for my investment accounts. The statements I received in the mail had always shown steady growth. But when I logged into the bank's official site, bypassing the portal Marcus had set up, the story was different. The numbers were off. There were dozens of transactions I didn't recognize. Large sums of money being wired out to other LELCs I'd never heard of. Titan Ventures, Northridge Capital, Summit Global. And the final balance. It was almost 60% less than what my last statement had claimed. The documents Marcus had been sending me were forgeries. Fakes. I felt a wave of nausea. I leaned back in my chair, the office spinning around me. This wasn't just a mistake or a single fraudulent company. This was a system, an elaborate, constructed lie, and I was standing right in the middle of it. Arthur's words echoed in my head. Let the numbers guys handle the numbers. You're getting stressed and confused. Trust me, it wasn't concern, it was a script. A carefully designed strategy to keep me docile, to keep me from looking too closely. He hadn't been protecting me from stress, he'd been protecting his secret. My father-in-law, the man who called me son, the generous patriarch who had given us our dream home, hadn't just made a mistake. He had built me a cage, gilded it with generosity and kindness, and locked the door without me ever realizing it. The IRS audit wasn't the problem. It was just the first flicker of light under the door of a very, very dark room. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that my name was on that company for a reason. When the whole rotten structure came crashing down, I was the one who was meant to be buried underneath it. The knowledge of the betrayal settled in not like a storm, but like a permanent, freezing fog. It seeped into every corner of my life. Every family dinner became a performance. I had to sit across from Arthur, watch him laugh and tell stories, and pretend that I didn't know he was a serpent. I had to smile when he clapped me on the back, the warmth of his hand feeling like a brand. The most painful part was watching Chloe. She would look at her father with such pure, uncomplicated love, and then look at me with a growing worry, unable to understand the distance she felt growing between us. How could I tell her that her hero, the man who built her world, was systematically dismantling mine? She would never believe me. I had no proof, only a collection of terrifying puzzle pieces that I couldn't yet fit together. My late-night sessions in the office became my sanctuary and my obsession. I was no longer just a graphic designer. I was a forensic accountant in training, fueled by rage and coffee. I started mapping it out on a giant whiteboard, the kind I usually used for brand storyboards. In the center, I drew a box and wrote Leo. Around it, I drew boxes for Apex Star Holdings and the other ghost LLCs I'd found. I used red yarn to connect the wire transfers, creating a spider web of fraud that all seemed to originate from Arthur's main development corporation. It was clear he was using my accounts, and these shell companies registered in my name to wash money. He was likely funneling undeclared income from his real estate deals, running it through my accounts as investment capital, and then moving it back to himself through a dozen different cutouts, making it look clean. The fake statements from the fake advisor, Marcus Thorne, were just to keep me quiet and happy, thinking my little nest egg was growing. The IRS audit of Apex meant that one of the threads had snapped, and the feds were starting to pull. I knew I was out of my depth. This was bigger than me. I needed help, but I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. It would be my word. The word of a stressed, obsessive artist against Arthur Vance, the beloved titan of Austin real estate. I needed a complete, undeniable picture. I needed a smoking gun, an armory of them. I thought of an old college friend, Samira. We hadn't been close, but I remembered she had gone on to work for one of the big accounting firms in Houston, specifically in their forensic division. Taking a massive leap of faith, I found her on LinkedIn and sent her a carefully worded message, asking if I could buy her a coffee to discuss a sensitive financial matter. We met at a sterile coffee shop halfway between Austin and Houston. I was a nervous wreck. I laid out the whole story, my voice low, showing her the printouts of the bank records and the fake statements from Marcus. She listened intently, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment, just tapping a pen on her notepad. "Leo," she said finally, her voice calm and professional. "I knew you were in a world of trouble. This isn't just tax evasion. This has all the markers of a classic money laundering scheme. And you, I'm afraid, are what the feds would call the unwitting accomplice, except they rarely believe the unwitting part." My blood ran cold. "So what do I do?" "First, you need a lawyer. A very, very good one. Second, you need to keep playing dumb. Don't let him know you suspect anything. The moment he thinks you're onto him, he'll shred everything and probably find a way to make it look like you were the mastermind who got spooked." She paused, looking me straight in the eye. "A third, you need to become his worst nightmare. You need to gather every piece of evidence you can. Every email, every text, every recorded call if it's legal in Texas. And it is as long as one party consents, and that party is you. We need to build a case so airtight that when you present it, he has no way out." That conversation changed everything. I wasn't just a victim anymore, I had a mission. Samira, taking pity on me, agreed to consult on the side, guiding me on what to look for. I became a spy in my own life. I started recording every phone call with Arthur and Marcus. I bought sophisticated software to recover deleted files from my computer, hoping to find traces of the original documents Marcus had me sign. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected place. Arthur, in his infinite generosity, had insisted on installing a state-of-the-art smart home system in our house when we moved in. He said it was for security. I now realized it was for his security, not mine. A way to have eyes and ears everywhere. But he'd made one mistake. He had given me the master administrator password. I don't think he ever imagined his non-numbers guy son-in-law would ever think to look inside the system's cloud storage. Late one night, I logged into the admin panel for the security system. Tucked away in a mislabeled folder named Architectural Drafts Backup were audio files. Dozens of them. They were automatically recorded conversations from the smart speakers in our living room and kitchen. My stomach churned. He had been listening to us. But as I scrolled through the file names, I saw what I was looking for. Conversations he had taken from the house when he'd been here alone with Marcus Thorne before we moved in, likely setting up the system. I put on my headphones and clicked play. The audio was crystal clear. It was Arthur and Marcus talking openly. "The designer is a perfect choice," Marcus was saying. "He's trusting, a little naive. And he's so desperate for your approval he'd sign a confession if you told him it was a birthday card." Then, Arthur's voice, colder and sharper than I had ever heard it. "He's not the first. He won't be the last. Chloe's ex-fiancé, the doctor, we ran the same play with him. Set him up with a few medical supply LCS. When he started asking too many questions, we leaked an anonymous tip about insurance fraud, ruined his career. Chloe was heartbroken, of course, but she came running right back to Daddy. She ripped the headphones off, my hands shaking with a fury so profound it felt like it was going to tear me apart. Chloe's previous engagement had ended abruptly. She never talked about it, only that he'd gotten into some terrible trouble and had to leave town. It wasn't just me. This was his pattern, his modus operandi. He didn't just control his daughter. He systematically destroyed any man who might give her a life independent of him, using them as disposable tools in his criminal enterprise along the way. This was beyond narcissism, it was psychopathy. That was the moment my desire for justice hardened into a need for total annihilation. He wasn't just going to go to jail. I was going to strip away the one thing he cared about more than money, his reputation, his legacy. With Samira's guidance, I spent the next 2 months compiling what she called the e-book of doom. It contained the recorded calls, the annotated bank statements, the evidence of the ghost advisor, the incorporation documents for all the shell companies, and the crown jewel, the audio file of him admitting to framing Chloe's ex-fiancé. I hired the best white-collar crime lawyer in Austin, We made copies. One for the U.S. Attorney's Office, one for the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, and one for a contact Samira had at the Wall Street Journal. The plan was to detonate everything at once. The final act was set for Arthur's 65th birthday party, a massive gala he was throwing for himself at the city's most expensive hotel. The entire Austin elite would be there. The night of the party, I felt strangely calm. I walked in with Chloe on my arm. She was so happy, so proud of her father. I felt a pang of guilt for the pain I was about to cause her, but it was overshadowed by the righteousness of my cause. This was a cancer, and I had to cut it out. I found Arthur holding court by the champagne fountain. I pulled him aside. "Arthur," I said, my voice even, "I need a moment of your time, in private." He was annoyed at being pulled away from his audience, but he led me to a small, empty lounge. "What is it, Leo?" he asked impatiently. "Make it quick." I didn't say a word. I just took out my phone, opened an audio file, and pressed play. It was the recording of him and Marcus. The one where he talked about me being naive. The one where he confessed to destroying the doctor. I watched his face. The jovial mask melted away. The color drained from his skin. The charismatic charmer was gone, replaced by a cornered rat. His eyes, for the first time, held genuine fear. What is that?" he stammered. "That," I said, my voice like steel, "is the end of your legacy." He lunged for the phone, but I was ready. I stepped back. "Don't bother, Arthur, it's too late. My lawyer delivered a copy of this and everything else to the U.S. Attorney an hour ago. The IRS got their copy too. And a certain reporter at the Wall Street Journal is probably typing up the headline right now. Real estate mogul Arthur Vance arrested in massive fraud and money laundering scheme. It has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" His whole body trembled. You wouldn't." "Chloe, you did this to her, not me," I said coldly. "You did this when you decided her happiness was less important than your control, when you decided my life was disposable." Right on cue, two plain-clothed federal agents entered the lounge. One of them looked at Arthur. "Arthur Vance, you need to come with us." The commotion spilled out into the main ballroom. The music stopped. 100 conversations died. Everyone saw the agents leading a pale, shell-shocked Arthur Vance away in handcuffs. I walked back to Chloe. She was standing frozen, her face a canvas of utter disbelief and horror. Her eyes met mine, filled with a million questions I couldn't answer right then. The fallout was catastrophic, just as I'd planned. Arthur was ruined, his empire dismantled by the investigation. The story was everywhere. We had to sell the house. It was an asset seized in the investigation, a house built on lies. Chloe was broken for a long time. There were months of therapy, tears, and painful conversations. But slowly, out from under the shadow of her father's suffocating control, she began to find her own strength. She had to grieve the father she thought she had, and it was brutal. But she saw the evidence, she heard the recordings. And eventually she understood. We started over. In a small rented apartment with almost no money to our name, but it was ours. Our life was finally our own. One evening, months later, Chloe turned to me. Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "You didn't just save yourself, Leo. You saved me too." And in that moment I knew I had made the right choice. I had lost a fortune, a house, and a life of comfort. But I had reclaimed my name, my sanity, and my wife. I had walked through fire, but I had walked out free.